Welcome to the presentation on backpacking in Torre del Paine, Chile. My name is Jose Gonzalez and I'll be presenting today. The agenda for today is we're going to talk about when to go to Chile to do the Torre del Paine hike or backpacking trip. We're going to also talk about how to get there, the possible routes that you can do once you're there. Also, we're going to talk about getting permits for spending the night in the different shelters or campsites. We'll talk about gear needed versus gear recommended. We'll talk about the skill set that you need in order to do this trip. And also, I'll go into details on my personal trip. In that way, you can also learn from my mistakes and successes. All right, so let's start with the first one, when to go. The ideal time is to go between November and early March. Again, that's going to be the summertime in the southern hemisphere. And if you go early, even if you can go in the month of October, it might be a little cold, but you will avoid the crowds. The weather in Patagonia, like this sign says, it's unpredictable. And when I was there, you can see the weather. I did a screenshot of the weather. So 9 degrees, 10 degrees, 12 degrees. And that changed the next day, in the next week. In the next couple of days. Okay, so where is Torre del Paine? So if we are looking at the map of North America, Central America, and South America, we're looking at down here, close to the city of Punta Arenas. So Patagonia is not in Punta Arenas. You will fly into Punta Arenas, so that's the international airport in Chile. And then you will have to take a bus from Punta Arenas all the way to Puerto Natales right here. And then the next day you will still have to get another set of transportation to go from Puerto Natales to the park. So Puerto Natales is a really neat city. You can find restaurants, overlooks the water, places to stay, anything from a hostel to a hotel. And it really neat to spend the night before going to the park there. And actually you have to spend the night there because of the time. And then once you are inside the park, you will go into a boat, in a catamaran. If you want to start from the Paine Grande side of the route, and I'll talk about routes in a moment. So the first route that you could do is the circuit. So you can do this whole thing going around and then going around here like this. Now if you want to do that, the O, you need to have a guide, especially for this leg right here. Actually, I think you're required to have a guide for that leg. If you're going to do the W, which is what I did, this because it has a shape of a W, you don't need a guide for that. You can do it on your own. So you can see in this slide a better representation of that O circuit or the W route. And this is a zoom-in version. So you will drive all the way to here, to Pudeto, and then here you will get into a catamaran that will take you all the way to the first Refugio Paine Grande. And a big building, everything comes by boat there. And in the Refugio, you would then start your trip. And it says Refugio, meaning shelter, and it looks more like a hotel. But also they have campsites, and that's what I did. And then from there, you can do this leg first. So that's one day. Then you can do this one, day 2. Maybe you can do this one, day 3, and then you can go all the way to the Torres, day 4, and camp here. And day 5, you can also, if day 4 you went all the way to here to the Refugio, then you can go to day 5 here. So you can do it in between 4 to 5 days, that W route. Now let's talk about permit and reservation. There are 3 different entities that will offer the permit for you to stay in a campsite or a refugio, like a little hostel. And it's important to know that because when you're planning your trip, if you want to, let's say, stay here at Campamento Gray, you need to do it through this company called Vertice. But if you want to stay the next day at Campamento Italiano, that is through CONAF, right? And then there's one more, which is Fantástico Sur, if you want to stay at any of these other sites. So the ideal scenario is that you have multiple options, right? So for day 1, for day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And sometimes, like I try to camp the whole time, but reservation for campsites were not available for some of the sites, so I had to spend a little bit more money to spend the night in the refugio. Which in hindsight, I don't mind. I think that it was just difficult for the budget. All right, so gear. So the first list is list of gear that I was happy that I had with me. So the first one was an outlet converter. So I can plug in my cell phone to get charged at a outlet, and they have outlets in all the refugios. So if you want to bring that with you, I highly recommend it so you can charge your electronics at the refugio. I'm glad that I brought my own solar panels and I was able to also use them to charge my electronic. I have my GoPro and I have my phone that I use as a camera. So that was very good to have. Also, I was glad that I brought a battery pack to recharge my cell phone and GoPro. And what I'll do is I'll charge with the solar panels, the battery pack, and then at the end of the day, if I was camping, not staying at a refugio, I will then charge my cell phone and GoPro from the battery pack. And lastly, I'm glad that I brought winter gear with me. I experienced all types of weather. Sun, rain, and snow. Now, I wish I did not pack my flip-flops. And those of you who know me might be surprised, but I didn't. And I regret that. So next time, I wish that I could bring a very lightweight, affordable flip-flops that I can use in the shower and at the end of the day to let my little toes breathe. Also, I didn't bring soap, and there was an opportunity to take a shower along the way in one of the refugios, and I wish that I had soap. However, I bought soap, and it was very expensive to buy the soap there. So I wish that I had soap with me. And then a day pack. There were some places that I wish that I will leave my big backpack behind and just use the day pack to explore. Lastly, I really wish that I had my hiking poles with me, especially for the climbs and also for the descents. I wish that I had those with me. It would have been so my knees and my joints would have been so much happier. All right, so I'm gonna talk about big picture costs. So the airfare from LA to Chile could be anywhere from $1,100 to $2,000. The bus and the catamaran, so the bus was about $25 and the catamaran was about $40. The entrance fee to the park was $35. The campsites or the refugio was anywhere from $10 a night for a campsite to $54 a night for a refugio. Food and beer, etc. It was at about $200, and the reason that I say this is I brought backpacking food with me, but they were the night before I went to a restaurant and I had a delicious meal, and you can see it here with a beer, Austral, and that cost me maybe, I don't know, $15, $20. But I wanted to spend that much money on a nice meal before going out to eat dehydrated food. So, and then I had a beer there in one of the refugio, and I think it was about $10. So plan and budget for how much you want to spend. You can see here in this photo, that was my meal of choice. I had some cheese, some crackers, some salchicha or salami, Okay, so the skills and the physical fitness that you need to have. So I have to say that this is a very realistic and doable hike. So if you train for it, you can achieve these. So my recommendation is get some basic backpacking skills under your belt. How to set up a tent, how to cook outdoors, how to do meal planning, how to pack your backpack, the gear that you need. So get that information and that skill in practice at home before you go to Chile and do some overnights maybe. And then keep in mind that you are going to hike about 8 to 10 miles a day with a heavy pack. Unless you book all refugio, so then your backpack is going to be very lightweight, but it's going to be expensive. But you could do that. You don't need to bring a tent. That takes a lot of space and weight if you don't want to. All right, so my trip was in October of 2017, and that's why I had different weather. So day 0, I went from Punta Arenas to Puerto Natales. That's me arriving to Puerto Natales, beautiful city. And then the next day, I drove to the park, or I took the bus to the park, and that's when I got into the park. So Bienvenido Parque Nacional Torre del Paine. And you can see the torres right behind me, right here. So day 1. And again, I did the W and I started right here at Paine Grande. So that's all of us hopping on that catamaran. And then we put our backpacks all on top of each other. And then we go out. It's gorgeous, beautiful. You can see the Cuernos right here in Bariloche. So we're going to see some of these in this presentation later on today too. That is coming in after that catamaran ride, going into the first park or refugio, Torre del Paine. And this is it. This is the building. And you can see here some little shelters built up here, platforms. And then you can see here there's some tents, and that's where I set up my tent. So that's the building where you check in. And then you can set up your tent. You can have food in these picnic tables out. This is a video of me setting up my tent. So it's a time speed of setting up the tent. And one of the things that I like about this video is that it shows how windy that place is. And you can see the back here, the leaves moving and the branches moving. That's how windy that place is. And it was windy for the first couple days, right? All right, so that's me setting up the tent. And that's Pico Bariloche that you could see from there, from the first refugio. And along the way, you will see these plaques, these markers where it tells you where you are. And I start here in Paine Grande, and then I start hiking this way, so you can also see the elevation gain in meters, and then it can tell you where you're at right there. And I was heading on day 1 to that Refugio Gray. And my goal was to go there, take some photos, and then spend maybe an hour, maybe less than that, and then head back for dinner. That's the hike along the way. That's what the trail looks like. There were some markers also that will give you the altitude, and the latitude and longitude. So the latitude and longitude. So you can look at your GPS and see if you're en route and how far you've gone and how far you have to go. And you can see here the glacier at the distance. That's a zoom in photo of the glacier. That is Lago Gray. A view from the top. just so impressive and gorgeous to see that glacier so close by. That's the glacier of Lago Grey. Piece of ice floating. So that was day one, and then I had dinner. I came back and had dinner. Day two, now, so that day was from here, catamaran, set up the tent and go hike here, and those were the videos and the photos that you were seeing of Lago Grey, and this is the glacier. And then I came back and had dinner and spent the night. The next day was from here, and my goal was to come all the way to Camp Britannico and then come down. So let's look at day two. You can see from that mirador of Lago Scottsburg the Cuernos, the two Cuernos here. And this is the trail, and you can see how windy it was too that day. That's how windy it was. Very impressive. Just the scenery is gorgeous, and that photo doesn't do justice to show how pretty the place, the park is. I want to point this out. There was a big fire, and you can still see some of the trees that are dead. There was a backpacker who was not responsible with the stove and burned acres and acres of the forest of the park. And so at that, from that point on, now you're required to only have open flames and cook in designated areas with a little designated device that they give you that you can put your stove in. Along the way, there were some bridges to cross. One person at the time on the bridge, but you can see how some people were not following rules. And in that W, so I first arrived to Campamento Italiano. I was not gonna spend the night there, but that was on the way. And that is the entrance to the guardabosques. And you can see the log also to write your name, so they can keep track of who's in the park and where you're at. There were signs along the way that will tell you distance to the next location. You can see in the distance here Paine Grande, and you can see here Los Cuernos. I spent the night on day two or night two at the Campamento Frances, and I set up my tent again here. This time was in a platform, and I brought my own tent, but you could also rent a tent already in a platform, and that way you don't have to carry it. This is the wind blocker that I mentioned earlier, that you have to put your stove on to prevent fires, and you have to cook in top of this platform using this wind blocker. I brought some dehydrated food. This one is a Thai curry meal, and you can see how I have also a long spoon, so I don't have to put my whole hand inside my food bag. But I really like having this as my dinners, because after a long day of hiking, all I had to do was boil water, add water, and eat it. And enjoy my night without having to cut onions and prepare a meal, right? So that is dinner. Now day three. So I went from the camp here, and my goal was to go back towards Campamento Italiano and then go all the way here to Camp Britannico, because I didn't have time. I spent the night around here, and so I wanted to go back. And so let's take a look at what happened. So I go back to from the Campamento Italiano, or go towards the Campamento Italiano, and then I'm hiking and I start seeing rain, and I'm going all the way. I can see the glacier. I'm gaining some altitude here, and then I see the snowstorm coming. And you can see here how that, there's the line of snow coming in towards me. And all of a sudden, starts snowing. So I decided, actually they closed the Mirador del Valle del Francés. They closed down, and so I couldn't go any farther. I had to turn back and start making my way to my next destination. Then it cleared up and it looked beautiful again. I love the snow too and the rain. But there I am, still with my rain gear. It was still cold, but there was no snow. And then, of course, after the storm, it's just beautiful. So that third day, I stay at the Refugio Los Cuernos. And this is one that I couldn't find a reservation to set up my tent. So I spent the night in one of these bunk houses that they fit about 6 people per bunk house. And yes, some of them have a bar. In this bar, that's the one I was telling you that the beers were $10. But I have a funny story, or a really fun story. There were some other people there, and they were having a good time playing Jenga and, eating and drinking. And one of them takes off his shoes, and he has tons of blisters. And I tell him, I said, listen, I have moleskin and I have training. Can I help you? And I went to my little room and grabbed my medical kit, put my gloves on, and work on this person's feet. And he was so happy. I popped the blisters, put some moleskin, did the whole donut sandwich, and he got me a couple beers that night. He wanted to pay me. I said, you cannot pay me. I did this because I wanted to. And turns out he is a dentist from Europe, and was doing this trip, and he was very kind to treat me to beers after. So day 4. On day 4, from that refugio, now it was time to go from this refugio all the way to the Refugio Chileno, and that's where I was going to spend the night there. And my goal was to go to see the Torres and then come back. So I went from here all the way to the Refugio, dropped my heavy backpack, or emptied the contents of my heavy backpack, and then went up to the Torres. And so that's the Refugio. And you can see how it was very windy that day too. Those are Los Cuernos nuevamente. Again, Cuernos. And this photo shows really how, it was their spring. So you can see how wet and muddy it is. And so my recommendation is bring waterproof boots, so you have dry feet at the end of the day. And this couple here, we were kind of like following each other along the way. I wish that I given them some of the photos, because I took a couple of photos of them along the way. It was really funny. We say hi, they were pleasant. And this is a shortcut to go to the Refugio Chileno, and then to the Mirador Las Torres, and there's another photo of the trail with some views. And this is already in the final stretch to get to the Refugio along the river, and that is the hotel / Refugio Las Torres, and that's that building. And they also have rooms, they make meals, and you can also charge electronics there. Everything that comes here, so the first Refugio that I show you, we came by boat. And this one, everything comes by either horse or mule. And so from here, I wanted to go to the Torres to check them out in case the weather will not be ideal the next day. So I start hiking towards the Torre, and you can see them at the distance. And I drop off my backpack, some of the content, especially the tent, and I brought some snacks, my 10 essentials, and I head to the Torres. And this is when I got to the Torres. This is at the base of the Torres, and you can see that they're a little covered by the fog here. And that's the Mirador. And that's me looking at the Torres of Torre del Paine in Chile. And I took a peek. It cleared for like maybe, I don't know, a few seconds. But it was really, it was foggy the whole time that I was there. So I said to myself, well, at least I was able to see some of them. And I'll come back the next day early in the morning. I actually wake up at 4 a.m. because I wanted to see them with no fog. And so that's the Torres right there. So the next morning, had an alpine star, 4 a.m. Other people who were staying in the Chileno, in the Refugio Chileno also took off at the same time with their headlamps. And we were trucking up the trail. I was familiar with the trail from the night before. And when I got there, I saw the whole thing was covered in snow. And then there was a rope that said, and you can see the rope right here, that said that because of the condition, the trail was closed. Big bummer. And I waited until sunrise to see if anything would have changed, but look, it's all covered in snow, and because it's so steep, and there's no really a trail up there above the tree line, it's just rocks. They were concerned that people that are not familiar with the area can get lost. They can slip and fall, or they can, get lost because they're not following the trail, the carryings on the trail. Day 5, had a great time. Waking up at 4 a.m., start my hike at 4:30 a.m., was making really good time. At 5 a.m. I got to the intersection where you can go up to the Torres, and this is what I found. Look behind me. The whole thing was covered in snow, and there was a big long rope with a sign that said trail closed. Bummer. I had a great time yesterday checking out the Torres. I was hoping to get another view today, but hey, that's Patagonia weather for you. So I was able to catch the bus and get back, and I had a great trip. I want to leave you with a couple things. So the first thing is start planning your trip at least 1 year in advance. And the reason that I say that is start training, start looking at making your reservations ahead of time, trying to get all the sites that you want in the order that you want them. Train, buy the gear that you need. So plan at least 1 year in advance. Number 2 is make reservations ahead of time. And then number 3 is if you're buying new gear, test your gear several times at home. Do overnight trips or multi-day trips and test your gear. Make sure that it works the way that you want, because you don't want to test anything new when you're out there in Patagonia, because it's hard to get gear once you're in the park, right? There's some outdoor shops in Punta Arenas, but again, you don't want to wait the day before to buy gear. But if something breaks on your trip down to Chile, know that they have some really good outdoor shops there that you can buy gear. And then lastly, bring extra money to enjoy hot meals or an adult beverage in any of the refugios if you want, but know that they are expensive because they got there by boat or by horse or by mule. All right, I hope that you can do this trip and that you have learned some aspects to consider when you're planning your trip to Patagonia. Thank you.